We shall now talk about the changes in computer technology in the third generation, fourth generation, and the current fifth generation of machines. The third generation of computers is classified between the dates 1964 to 1971. An important change in this particular generation is the electrical and electronic components like transistors, resistors, capacitors were fabricated on integrated circuits. So this is an example of IC or integrated circuit. The advantage is more number of transistors, resistors, capacitors could be placed in a smaller area, leading to smaller computers, more reliable machines, faster machines consuming less power, and so on. This is all compared to the previous generation. Now, an important change that happened here was in the previous generations, we'll be using punch card as input devices. In this generation, we're using keyboards as a source of input for providing data and instructions to a computer. The output was still the printout. Another important change was we began to have display monitors like the current monitors, LCD, LED monitors you'll use. Not the LCD, LED, but they were mostly CRT based, cathode ray tube based monitors, which were used for looking into what is on the screen by the operators, or known as console operators. Operating systems, again, it's going to be discussed in the fourth chapter, but just operating system is a software. You can think of operating system through an example like Windows, which you have been using. Operating systems were extensively used to provide services to the user. So operating systems made a big entry during this particular generation. Now, high level languages like Fortran, COBOL, Algol, all these gained wider usage and acceptance in this particular generation. Now, examples of machines of this particular generation were IBM 36070, PDP-10, and Honeywell 6000 machine. So these are some of the features of this particular generation. Again, if you see a trend, machines are becoming compact, more reliable, more powerful, consuming less power, and so on. Important changes is keyboard for input, display monitors for the operators to see what is happening on the screen, and development of high-level languages. The fourth generation of computers. The fourth generation of computers is characterized by the advent or the origination of microprocessors. Microprocessors is your central processing unit. So the fourth generation constitutes from 1971 till almost 2000 and so on. So it's built on extremely powerful microprocessors like your Intel microprocessor. Now, you need to understand a technical term called as integration, large scale integration. Suppose you can fit in 10 transistors per millimeter. In very large scale integration, maybe you may be able to fit 10,000 transistors per millimeter. As a consequence, the size of the circuit becomes smaller, consumes less power, is more powerful because at a smaller space, more powerful machines can be built. Now, all these changes of a microprocessor and VLSI technology. VLSI is an electronic term which is used to indicate the density of electronic components that can be fabricated or created in a unit area. The higher number of transistors, resistors, capacitors that can be placed in a unit area, the better the performance of the machine is going to be, because smaller size is going to give you more power. So the machines became more compact, more reliable compared to the previous generation, and led to the PC revolution. An important thing in this particular generation was you had the introduction of high level languages like C, C++. In fact, the language C was developed on this particular machine called as PDP-11. In fact, PDP-11 has a historical importance in the development of C. Now, the operating systems were quite basic here, but here powerful operating systems began to come into picture. Operating systems were there in the previous generation, but operating systems became much more powerful. You had Windows, you had Unix and all those coming into picture. The advent of powerful machines along with the networking technology led to the development of internet as we know it today. So the internet is thanks to the developments in this particular generation. So examples of machines in this particular generation are Star 1000, PDP-11 and DC-10 are examples of machines of this particular generation. Now let's try to take a look at what are the developments of the fifth generation of computers. So in the fifth generation of computers, the major characteristic of the fifth generation was in the hardware in place of the large scale integration. So suppose in 5 millimeters you could put 20,000 transistors. In ULSI maybe you could put 2 million or even 20 million transistors in the same space. So that is referred to as a ultra large scale integration technology. Now in the software side, the machines were used more for applications in artificial intelligence and robotics. That is the trend today. Today the trend of the future is in application intelligence and robotics. All the machines have been designed using ULSI technology, leading to higher density of circuits occupying very little space, more reliable, consuming less power, cheaper, faster, and so on. Now, the hardware exploits parallel processing techniques. Let me tell you what is parallel processing techniques in brief. Suppose I'm doing matrix addition of a 10 by 10 matrix. Okay, the same process is being repeated on each element in the two matrices. So I can use multiple CPUs or multiple central processing units to speed up the addition. So here I'm using hardware to increase the speed of processing. Suppose say if I'm using one CPU to add two matrices, if it takes, let's give me an example, let it take 1 minute. So if I'm using 10 CPUs, it may just take a second or two to finish the addition because the process at each location is the same. By increasing the hardware, I can parallelly execute certain steps much faster. Now, here in this particular generation, the focus is on trying to get computer technology to behave more like humans through the use of artificial intelligence and robotics. We are modifying the software, we are modifying the hardware so that computers behave more like me and you. So the big development in this particular thing is natural language processing. Natural language, in the sense, the language I am talking to you is an example of natural language. C, C++, COBOL, Fortran, Java, these are all examples of computer language. Natural language is much more difficult to process because it depends on the context I am speaking. Okay, every time I speak, if I speak about a different issue, you understand it based on the context. But programming languages are context not dependent on the context. They always mean the same at every point of time. Therefore, natural language processing is one of the most important tasks of this particular generation.